Welcome everyone to another special edition of Play It Through, and this time around we're doing my first Genesis ROM hack, and it's for Sonic the Hedgehog 2 called Sonic 2 XL. Now this ROM hack is a very basic ROM hack for Sonic 2 where it doesn't change up the levels or anything, which I'm not usually a fan of that kind of ROM hack, but in this instance there's a special gimmick to it which makes it more challenging, or at least different than your typical Sonic 2 playthrough, and that is when you consume rings or collect rings, you actually get fatter. Yes, Sonic will actually get fatter, and the mechanics of it works really well of Sonic slowly getting fatter as you pick up more rings, as well as him being hindered because of his fatness. His speed slows down, he's unable to jump. Once he gets too fat, he instantly can't move anymore and you dive because of it. The only way to remove the fat is not by getting hit and losing your rings. You actually have to hit the question mark boxes. They are the same ones that would be in the multiplayer mode that would have a random item hidden inside of them. But in this version of the game, they're in the main game, and when you get them, you become thin, and you have to kind of space out the amount of rings that you end up collecting. It makes me take different routes that I may not necessarily normally take in certain levels, and definitely adds a bit of strategy. In case you don't know, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is my absolute favorite Sonic game all time. 3D, 2D, it doesn't matter. My absolute favorite Sonic game will always be Sonic 2. I love the levels, I love the soundtrack. The only thing that Sonic 2 didn't have to it that could have made it perfect in some ways was like a save feature, because it is a relatively lengthy game as far as the amount of levels, but still, even with all that, Sonic 2 is just an absolute masterpiece, in my opinion, of course. Any ROM hack that kind of does anything with Sonic 2, I'm always a little curious, and I saw this one was gaining a bit of popularity out there, so I wanted to give it a shot. The amount of fat that Sonic can end up getting is quite humorous, and just really ends up, like I said, adding a different kind of strategy to the levels. Right at the end, usually before a boss fight, thankfully there's always one of those question mark boxes so that you don't go into a boss fight while being overweight, as it would make some bosses impossible to beat. There are times where you can get completely stuck in the game because Sonic's unable to go up a ramp or be able to go through things. I got stuck a couple of times in practice runs of the game because of it. There's also a few levels in particular that end up being very, very difficult to lose the rings or not collect the rings at all. That starts to become a challenge more so in Chemical Plant Zone that we'll be going to next as we finish up Act 2 here of Emerald Hill Zone. Chemical Plant Zone has a few different paths that you can take. A lot of levels in Sonic 2 have a few different paths or branches that you can take that all eventually lead to the same end. There's a couple of paths in Chemical Plant that allow you to get past the level relatively quickly. For example, if you jump up and don't hit this spring and go over, you can speed things up a little bit, as well as a few jumps, but you have to be careful. Like here, I have to jump off the ramp just in the right time so I don't accidentally go too high up to collect any of the rings above, as it may be too many rings and end up putting me at a point where I wouldn't be able to jump high enough anymore. Already, with the little bit of weight that I have, I'm able to make the jump up there, so I have to kind of go to the lower path here and continue along this way. Enemies can still hit you, of course, and make you drop your rings, but you don't lose that fatness until you hit those question mark blocks, so because of that, you always have to be extra careful when going through the stages in this version. Thankfully, I can run underneath that set of rings, watching out for the jumping blue balls coming out of the pipe there, but a little bit later on, I can finish up Act 1 here and move on to Act 2 of Chemical Plant. Not only is Sonic 2 my personal favorite Sonic, it's probably the one I have played and beaten the most as well. I've memorized quite a good chunk of the levels. Now here at the very beginning, we have to be very careful. We want to hit all that speed to get up here, but I want to hold left on the D-pad once I launch, and now I'll be able to land on that platform safely, avoiding that mass of rings. Now, it's funner or more interesting to include tails on your journey. I'm not positive because of the way the sporadicness works with Tails, but I'm pretty sure the rings he ends up collecting still end up adding to Sonic's overall weight, so it just adds even more of the interesting strategy to everything. Thankfully, even though I gather a lot of rings here, there's a question mark block right away, so I don't end up dying. That amount of rings I took from those loops would have definitely ended my life there. After traveling through the pipes, make sure I don't hit the spring, and then hit another one of those speed boosts and go over here. Once again, hitting another big speed ramp, but having to hold left on the D-pad so that I don't collect any of the rings above me. Wait for this to go all the way down so I don't collect any rings by stepping off of the platform a bit early. I've always hated this particular spot. I always get nervous making the transfer over, and then of course right into this Chamber of Death, which I'm sure killed quite a many gamer when they were younger, because you have a limited amount because there are no air things to pick up throughout, and it's a bit challenging to make some of these jumps, especially when you're pretty early on in the game. If you really never played Sonic before, that can be a bit of a challenging spot. Right after that, another little bit of a jump on a couple of platforms, but a whole bunch of rings through the loops. Once again, thankfully, another one of those question mark blocks. And after another very scary jump that you have to make, it's time for the boss fight, which always ends up being very easy as long as Tails doesn't screw you here, which he can. Because if Tails hits Robotnik at the right moment when you're about to hit him, sometimes you can fall through Robotnik and end up going into the water below and end up dying that way. That's happened a few times. Normally when I play Sonic 2, I turn Tails off. I just play as Sonic only, as I find that more enjoyable. Also, because of the whole kind of gimmick of this, it's, I would say near impossible. I wouldn't say completely impossible, but near impossible to get the Chaos Emeralds, as you would still need to get 50 rings before hitting a halfway marker, or one of the checkpoint markers, to get the bonus level to even appear. And because of that, of course, I'm not going to even mess with getting them and trying to complete them. I've always hated the bonus levels or whatever in Sonic 2. Probably my least favorite part of the game. Only thing that's about equal to it is Metropolis Zone, when we get to that later on, as I've never liked that level at all. Still curse its name every time I get to it. Now here I'm really fat, and I would actually be dead, but because of the momentum of the speed, I love the sprite work on Sonic. When he gets really fat and still spinning in a ball, you can kind of see his face like shocked and looking at you as he's just basically tumbling his whole body. And Fat is just tumbling towards the exit goal and then completing the stage that way. Wait here at the very beginning for these to swing over and then swing on to the next one. There's a couple of paths here. If you take the upper path, you don't have to deal with as much underwater segments here during this level. Still have to do quite a bit of avoiding of rings though, so it's still a bit challenging for sure trying to get through it, as this grinder is waiting for me here. Making that big leap. Unfortunately, I've gained quite a bit of weight here, so I can't really jump very high to get through this entire segment, and I have to be careful that I don't end up messing up. Like right here, I can't go past this column because I've gained weight, so I have to do a little bit of backtracking and go a separate way here back down into the water below, and now from here I can just kind of jump inside the wall and go this way instead, just because unfortunately I've gotten way too fat at this point. Luckily, I'm able to make those couple of jumps so that I can get myself out of the water. But now I've gotten too many rings. But there we go. Able to hit one of those question mark blocks right before the Robotnik fight. Get on top of the totem pole and, of course, do the long jumps towards him. I think you can kind of jump on him consistently, but I've always hit him once, kind of get back to the totem pole, and then repeat the process until you end up delivering all the hits necessary to defeat him, and we can move on to the next level. Good old Casino Night Zone, another one of my favorites, and probably a lot of people's favorites, are one of the more memorable stages from Sonic 2. Also, probably one of the reasons why I was always fascinated, even as a kid, with casinos. I learned very early on how to play a lot of casino games, and I can blame part of my love for gambling, slot machines, card games, and all, probably on Casino Night Zone. Probably just at least a little bit. A little tiny bit. While practicing the game, though, this was the first level that really gave me issues. In my practice runs, I did die once in the Chemical Plant Zone, but I didn't die multiple times until I ended up making it to Casino Night, and it made me kind of rework my pattern and kind of be like, I need to go this way in a couple of the areas. So it's a little bit of an unconventional path that I definitely would not normally take when playing through Casino Night, so you'll get to see a few areas that maybe you don't necessarily see during most playthroughs, I guess, of Casino Night, or maybe that is the path that you end up taking. Either way, level 1, not as much of trouble. It's a lot of changes, though, in Act 2. I go a little bit different of a route than I'm used to, for sure. As Act 2 begins, bounce off of these little things here. I don't know what they're officially called. Let me know in the comments. There's like multiple changing blocks. I always called them chips. I don't know what exactly they were meant to be, but either way, like these things right here that change multiple colors. I don't know if they have a specific name or anything. Either way, getting past that, we're going through this pathway here. Grab the speed shoes, and then you kind of run through the next little bit of the stage, hitting another checkpoint marker, which are always useful because there are some times where like I end up getting too many rings after that and I had to reset back and I had to be like, what path should I end up taking instead to counteract that, like going up here and going this direction. Now instead of bouncing up, I'm going to head downwards, bounce off these things. Now this is normal, what I would normally do. Hug the right area here, and then when you get up here, it's a little bit challenging to try to get through this without really getting too many rings. Have to kind of bounce specifically so that you hit the 3 in the middle and then get over to the right. Thankfully, there's a question mark block waiting for you, but all those coins, or rings, sorry, in that spot would definitely be enough to kind of finish off Sonic here. Also have to make sure that we don't accidentally ever hit the various different slot machines and risk accidentally getting one of the big bonus prizes. The casino boss is always one of the more challenging ones, especially early on in Sonic. You can do it a couple of ways. When I was younger, I never knew you could actually roll up the sides and then jump at them, so I always had to defeat them using the flippers instead, making the battle a lot tougher, but doing the dash up the sides and then just jumping towards Robotnik in order to hit him is such an easier path to take. Either way, with Robotnik defeated once again, it's time to move on to the next stage. Now, Hilltop Zone is another one that is a favorite of mine. I've always loved the song in particular for Hilltop, but it's also a level for this particular ROM hack that ends up being an extreme challenge because of the amount of rings that are like pretty much directly in your path. Even right here, being bounced off of the seesaw, you can end up hitting a bunch of rings. You gotta try to get off of that as quickly as possible. Going through the narrow little passageway, once again, more rings as soon as you end up coming out of it. There just ends up being just tons of rings that they basically are forcing on you in Hilltop. One thing that I learned because of playing this hack, though, is just how many rings are like that. I never would have guessed there was that many rings kind of thrown at you that could, you know, be collected without really even trying. And having to kind of work my way around those gave me a kind of a different, revelation of the game, or new appreciation in some ways for just how lenient Sega was as far as giving you those rings. Now, I decided to drop down all the way into the lava below instead of going down on the conveyor belts or the gondolas there. I usually end up doing that anyway, just because I'm like, yeah, just get down there quicker, even if I end up landing in the lava and get hurt. But even more so in the case of this ROM hack, so I don't end up accidentally grabbing too many rings. After going through here and getting a big burst of speed, don't want to collect many of those rings there. Drop on down through there. Unfortunately, I hit all of them here, but that's the end of the level, so even though I'm a little bit chubby, by the time I hit the sign, at least I'm able to complete the stage. Now, Act 2 is definitely tougher to avoid the rings and be able to survive here in this ROM hack. Right at the start, unfortunately, you have to grab some rings as you bust up here using the spring. There's a question mark block at the top, though. But right after that, you have to go through a couple more rings in order to break the ground open. And then when you come through, a whole bunch more. So it's just a bunch of rings being bombarding at you pretty much at the very start of Hilltop 2. I also love the animation of Sonic once he does get fatter, of him having to kind of like tuck into himself as best as possible. And when he ends up getting right before the breaking point, he can't even like duck into himself at all because of how fat he ends up becoming. This segment here, another very tough one to try to jump my way through and be able to survive. Right here I would go inside, grab the invincibility for just a bit to help me out. Wait for the right moment before attempting to jump to this platform and then on to the next couple ones. There are a bunch of rings there, though, so still have to be careful. Even right here, jump through the rings. I ended up getting 4 of them, but it's better than getting all 6 of the rings that were located in that very narrow hallway. Avoid the ones here by getting a spring upwards. Then right when you make it onto the gondola, just jump off the left side. Land here and then kind of jump over to the right. You'll definitely probably land in the lava, but this way you'll be able to survive. Like, that spot in particular ended up killing me one time during my practice sessions, just because I got so many rings during that segment, and I couldn't jump out of the lava at the end. I was so fat, I ended up just having to burn Sonic because of it. Either way, there's the question mark block in time for the boss fight here at Hilltop. Get Robotnik to spawn, jump right immediately on top of him, and just destroy him before he's able to really kind of do anything. As long as I have one ring, I just kind of go at it. It's a lot harder if you don't have rings. It's going to be more precise, count out every jump, and make sure that you don't accidentally fall down and die because of the lava. But another very easy Robotnik fight, and time to move on to Mystic Cave. Now, Mystic Cave is a weirder stage. It's one of the last really great ones, in my opinion. I'm not really a big fan of Oil Ocean, I hate Metropolis. Then it kind of picks back up with Air Fortress and those levels. Love those final couple of levels. But Mystic Cave is another good one, and then kind of like the game trails off a little bit for me as far as the overall levels. But then again, I'm sure out there's plenty of people that love Oil Ocean and love Metropolis Zone. Maybe I'm one of those oddballs that don't like those particular 2 zones. But either way, love Mystic Cave here. Have to be careful always, though, of these blocks. I don't end up getting squashed, as there are some frames during the course of Mystic Cave that can end up causing you to get kind of like squashed at any moment, and can happen really quickly. Right there, you may have noticed I kind of went up, collected all the rings, and then grabbed that question mark block. That way, I could get up there. I wouldn't be already at a disadvantage. Right here, collect those rings, that way I don't accidentally collect them after I end up hitting the question mark block. Down here, be sure to grab this next question mark block that came right after that previous one. But hit that, and then I can grab onto the handle here and pull down this little bridge thing. As a kid, I would constantly make the mistake of going too far left there and go back down the platform instead of hitting the bar above me in order to get across and finish up the stage. Now, one of the cool things that was done later on is Sonic 2 has been re-released on countless number of like systems and bundles and packages and all kinds of stuff like that. But they actually did an iOS or like a mobile version of Sonic 2. And one of the really cool things about that mobile version was they added back Hidden Palace Zone, which is, of course, the long-lost level of Sonic 2. The music for it is included in the sound test, but the level's not actually in the game, and no remnants of it really remain other than the song being on the sound test. But if you hack things, you can kind of get to a half-finished version or like mostly unfinished version of it. And what they did was for the iOS port, they actually added this level back in, and what's cool is to get there is not like another zone added to the game normally, but instead, on the bottomless pits, which are coming up here, that actually will end up taking you to Hidden Palace if you accidentally ended up falling down it. So that's like one of the really cool things. I'm not really a big fan, of course, of iOS or mobile ports, especially of platformers, as I really feel like the only way to truly have a great platformer is by having a controller, as the precision just won't be there with a touchscreen. But either way, that's definitely something that I love about the iOS version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now here we have the boss fight for Mystic Cave, and this fight is another relatively challenging one at first just because of the amount kind of coming at you. It's hard to kind of lock Robotnik and kill him before he ends up getting completely back into the ceiling, at least one cycle. As long as you have a few rings, you can kind of one cycle him by taking damage and stuff, but it's still a little bit challenging to do. But with Mystic Cave down, we now move on to Oil Ocean. Now begins the wonderful trek of Oil Ocean, which is just a course that ends up being convoluted for me. Even today, I can still sometimes accidentally get lost in it and end up going the wrong direction, more so in Act 2 than in Act 1. I do like some of the enemies. I've always liked those octopus enemies that have like the rotating tentacles below them as they're shooting out projectiles at you. These things, though, have always been a pain, waiting for them to kind of pop up or land so that you'll be able to get on them and then keep on moving. Thankfully, there's a question mark block right here. We can hit that one. As soon as we get across over to the bridge, immediately jump so that we can avoid that set of 3 rings there. There's dang flying seahorses, which just kind of like home in on you. They try to chase you down. Sometimes it's awkward to hit them. I hate the fallable bridges because Tails ends up setting them off before I'm able to even get to them. I really do think as nice of a novelty as it was that Tails was included as like your partner throughout the course of the game, he always causes more trouble than he ends up being worth. As I've now reached maximum fat level here, I gotta be very careful when I'm making these jumps. Look how fast Sonic can go here as I attempt to make it across these platforms. I have to be really careful. The game even slows down as I'm doing it, and I kind of glitch through before I end up hitting all this oil slicks. I'm done. Oh, nope, I'm not getting out of this one. This is done. Unfortunately, though, sometimes you're going to be unable because you get to so much weight. You just cannot keep going, so there we go. There's the first death due to the wonderful fatness that was Sonic there. Have to be careful I don't accidentally hit the spikes here, but I want to take the upper path now and kind of avoid all those oil slicks, or at least some of those oil slicks there. End up hitting them here, though, and go all the way down. But now, at least I can jump out of the oil so that I don't end up drowning in it again. Then again, Sonic looked, pretty comfortable. He probably thought it was like the freaking river of chocolate from Willy Wonka as he slowly drowned in it. But unfortunately for him, it was oil. Mess up that jump pretty epically there as I try to make it to the next one of those platforms. Thankfully, though, almost at the end here of Oil Ocean Act 1. Just a little bit farther to go. First time we get to hit one of these great things that's kind of shoot us up and bounce us all around while trying to get through. Always takes forever for it to happen, too, so it just adds to the waiting factor here. There we go, hit another one of these and get to this one. We're another moving elevator platform, but we can kind of force our way against the wind here. Guess we don't have enough weight on us quite yet. Either way, get up here and then we can just run the last little bit. Thankfully, Oil Ocean Zone Act 1 has been complete. And the fun just continues on in Oil Ocean Act 2, jumping over a whole bunch of rings as we start off. I have to also be careful because I don't want to collect really any, if possible, but of course that leaves me extremely vulnerable to accidentally die from being hit. The only level in the game where you don't have to really worry about that, of course, is the final act of the entire game, Because, of course, there's no rings in Death Egg, so that's like the one plus. For the one time, and the only one time I'll love the fact that there's no rings in Death Egg in Sonic 2 is because I don't have any chance of gaining that fatness. It would have been interesting, though, for the ROM hack to have included a ring or just a few rings, enough to get him a little bit fat before you end up facing off with the Robotnik and Metal Sonic bosses. That would have made things pretty darn challenging. After being blasted out of this thing here, I have to make sure I hold left so that I don't end up collecting those rings, wait for the spikes, try to get under them if I can. Making those little short jumps end up causing me to run into more rings than I wanted to. After hitting that check mark, jump into one of these things, get my way spun around a little bit, and then head right back to the left, take the elevator up, and hit another one of these things to blast me through. Like I said, I always end up getting a little bit lost, a little bit mixed up in Oil Ocean. If I end up going the wrong way, just slightly, I end up looping back around like a continuous loop like an idiot. Collect way more rings there than I necessarily probably should have. But either way, work my way back on down. Fortunately, this seahorse ends up getting in my way and hitting me, and now I'm kind of stuck. Come on, get out. There we go. Okay, woo! I'm able to make it up and get to the end. Thankfully, I'm at the end of the level. Now time just to fight Robotnik. Now, this Robotnik's hard to actually hit all the hits. I don't know if it's even possible to one-cycle this Robotnik. I don't know. It would take a lot of precision to even attempt it. I don't think you can, though. Have to go through at least one loop of waiting for the laser beam to shoot at you. I always love the effect of the laser when it hits the ground you're standing on. It does that fire effect that goes across. Always thought that was a really, really cool effect. Once Robotnik is finished off, we now move on, of course, to the beautiful and luxurious Metropolis Zone. I hate this level so much. So much. The one thing that Metropolis Zone does have, though, is a great song. I love the song. It's actually very easy to not only, like, hum along to, but also make up lyrics to. Like, I consistently, when I'm playing through, I'm just cursing this level's name out as I'm playing it, and usually do it to the beat and notes of the song, just because I hate Metropolis Zone. I know there's somebody out there who loves it. It's like their favorite level. They think it's like the coolest looking thing ever. I'm not really into the whole, like, metal-themed levels in Sonic games all that much. I like more of the outdoor or interesting ones like that. So that just adds to it, and then it's the whole frustration of not only is it a pain-in-the-butt level, but it has 3 acts, which no other, level has in the entire game. I mean, granted, every level in Sonic 1, you had the multiple acts in Sonic 1 with, levels with 3, but when it came to Sonic 2, it was like, we got it down to just 2 acts. You only need 2 acts for Sonic 2, except for Metropolis Zone. We're going to make sure that level there has 3. Now, here's a really tough spot. I'm barely able to roll and hit that question mark block. If that wasn't there, I was dead, for sure. I was going to end up being dead by rolling my way on through. Up here, hit this switch so I can pull this thing over and then jump onto the spring, knocking my way up and hitting another one of the buttons. Doing this to the best of my ability so I don't get any unnecessary rings as I'm moving my way through. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to avoid a lot of the rings in Metropolis, but not, like, possible to dodge all of them while going through. Be sure to hit this thing before bouncing my way up, accidentally. Now I can head back on down. Whoop! Probably one of the coolest effects of Metropolis Zone is there's tubes that quickly kind of transport you through. These are also pretty cool right here, these like moving platforms, like just the way everything kind of moves with the gears and stuff. But the other thing that makes Metropolis so frustrating is the other enemies that you deal with. The crab has some really bad hit detection as far as being able to actually hit him, and then those mantises also can be extremely annoying with not only They always put them on the edge of certain platforms, and they end up throwing out the blade and end up hitting you no matter what you end up doing. There's that one in particular that if it hits you off of the rotating screw, it knocks you all the way back down to the bottom of an area after you had to, like, dash your way or run your way all the way up using the screw, and you end up having to, like, backtrack a bunch in order to get the dang thing to respawn. Just so many great and wonderful moments contained within this zone. Continuing through here, getting those gears near the beginning, after collecting some rings, making this jumps a little bit difficult because I got a little bit of a gut going here, and then immediately, thankfully, there's a question mark block, because if that one wasn't hanging up there, which I'm pretty sure was added specifically to the ROM hack, it would be impossible to get through that segment without instantly being screwed. So I'm glad that they included that extra one there. I'm pretty sure most of the question mark blocks, maybe I'm wrong, it's been, you know, I don't have a screen-by-screen comparison to every little moment in my head of Sonic 2, but I'm pretty sure most of the question mark blocks that are in the game were originally other items, with the exception, I know for sure, that one was, like, kind of added, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. It's been a little bit. Maybe there's a coin block there normally or whatever. After getting through that, when it shuts on down, run to the right. One of those crabs is waiting to hit me with one of those big giant claws of theirs. Have to have enough jumping ability here so I can get up here and hit this check mark. Now here's another instance where I kind of go through, hit all the rings, and then drop on back down to hit the question mark. That way I've lost the gut after collecting already the rings that are going to inevitably be collected as I make my way up that little ramp. Unfortunately unable to dodge the mantis there, because I'd rather get hit and lose my rings than accidentally collect extra rings, so I'll take damage in this instance. Especially when I gotta do this jumping right here and I end up getting a bunch of rings as I do it. Now here's another spot where you're gonna unfortunately have to get a bunch of rings, which makes this segment really challenging. Gotta do just enough speed and then be able to barely make this jump over to the left area where I can then hit the switch and keep on going, but that was pretty tough. I died there a couple of times. During my practice run, I ended up dying twice at that spot just because I ended up making a mistake and ended up missing enough rings that I ended up just being too fat to make the jump over. Thankfully, though, we're almost to the end of Act 2 here, after making it up there, and then we'll hit this spring to bounce up. Now I just gotta run over to the right and finish up the level, and now we get to move on to Act 3 of Metropolis, and thankfully we're almost done Metropolis Zone. Metropolis Zone Act 3 starts off right at the beginning with one of those mantises who I have to jump over as I want to avoid all those rings. Same goes with all the rings located here on the rotating platform of all the mechanical gears and stuff. Do a big giant leap over the gears, that way I avoid them, go underneath the crushers or above them. Either way works. After I kind of do the big loop there with that ramp, I can thankfully hit a question mark block right after that, but have to be careful going up here. All these stars are always annoying. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to line yourself up with the middle and bottom side, whatever side you're on with the stars. Able to line yourself up so that they end up breaking apart in that star pattern and can end up going in between where I'm standing. That way, I don't accidentally get knocked off of the rotating gear. Now here's another chance. Thankfully, I can jump off of that a little bit, because I need to have just enough left so I can get up here in order to move my way across the ramp and land and be able to hit that question mark block. That ends up being another pretty tough spot, that last one I just did right before that question mark block. Now over here, drop down in between the gears, that way I can avoid hitting and landing on the spikes. Thankfully there's no rings here on this ramp, so I'll be able to get up and land. But the problem is there is that crab. I always usually run into that crab while I'm doing that ramp. This time I guess I got lucky as I'm going through. Always gotta be careful on this rotating thing here that you don't go too far up and end up landing on those spikes above you. Question mark block before hitting a bunch of bouncy pads. There is that invincibility shield, force field that you can grab on the left side, but I'm just gonna go ahead and avoid it right now and keep on heading over to the right side. No rings, but able to survive past the mantis. I can collect one ring here and be able to kind of get through. I try to avoid as many as possible, but unfortunately picked up a couple before landing on this moving platform. As long as you don't jump or anything, you won't cause any of those stars to activate and get near you, so you won't accidentally get blown off or knocked back off of that moving platform. After getting past that gear, I can hit the question mark block, de-fatten Sonic. Now right here, you gotta run up this gear and try to get it up while avoiding the star on that right side at the beginning. Thankfully, for the most part, of course, during the series of this gear, as well as the one that you jump to when you get to the top of this one, is those stars on this right side. Thankfully, though, like I said, as long as you get between those 2 points, you can always avoid getting hit by the spikes as they shoot off of it. Sometimes some of them won't even activate, which is always a nice little thing if they don't end up activating. That way you don't even got to worry about dodging them. Now here, I end up hitting the checkpoint, get on the moving platform. It's time for the Robotnik boss. Arguably, in my opinion, the toughest Robotnik to deal with. I collect the rings, then hit the question mark block. That way I have no fat going into the fight. And the timing that you need is pretty precise. It's also very easy to lose your rings during this fight. Every time you end up hitting him, of course, he ends up causing one of those eggs to spawn off him and make those clones. I kind of time it and like count to myself in my head as it's kind of moving down so that I can time my jumps up correctly at him. And once you get a few of them taken away, it's a lot easier, of course, to finish him off and finish off the rest of the hits here. But still, this fight always gives me trouble whenever I end up playing Sonic 2. Once he's defeated, though, we get to go on to one of my favorite areas of the game. It's just a really, really cool and relaxing level that gets to follow this one up. Sky Chase has an awesome song that goes along with it. It's a scrolling level. I still have to worry about the whole rings thing, though, because if you collect too many rings, you can still get too fat and end up dying, even during this level. There is a question mark block at it, though, like midway or midpoint of the stage, but I'm going to do my best, of course, to avoid the rings while going through it. I love the enemies, the way they're set up and their own moving vehicles are flying towards you. It's just one of the most awesome moments of Sonic 2 for sure is this stage. And definitely a nice calming level after Metropolis Zone and before the extremely challenging Wing Fortress that we get to go to next. Still have to be a little bit careful. These guys, of course, dropping down the little spiked balls on top of me as I'm going underneath. I want to be careful not to jump too far up so that I don't accidentally end up collecting unnecessary rings. During my level here, I try to collect only 1 or 2 rings at most. That way, if I get hit, I, won't end up dying, but that way I don't get any extra weight added to Sonic here. During this segment here, we get to actually pass the level that you're going to be going to next, which I always thought was a really cool moment. When moving down across it, though, when you get near the bottom, you actually have a question mark block that you can hit, and do that in order to collect one of those question mark boxes, get your weight taken away from you if you've accidentally gained a little bit during the course of the level here. While there isn't a whole lot more to the level as we move on through it here, I still have to be very careful. There is a good amount of rings still kind of scattered around that are very easy to accidentally pick up. Once we get past these turtles, though, it's time to move on to Wing Fortress. I always love the beginning here. Tails gets blasted out of the sky, and you have to jump to the platform in time before the plane ends up going down. I'm going to make sure I don't end up hitting that there, because, of course, I would end up collecting a whole bunch of rings. I try to do my best to jump through this and not collect very many, but it's near impossible to dodge that many. Thankfully, though, there is a question mark block right there, though. I can grab that. Once again, here's another case where this thing will end up launching me, but I'm going to jump up, grab the shield, and then continue over to the right. These jumps, the jumps are so specific during Wing Fortress. If you've ever beaten Wing Fortress or played it before, you know what I'm talking about. There's so many instances where things have to be very precise. Like that jump right there, I almost ended up dying. I barely landed on that platform safely after I was hanging onto that bar and trying to make it through. Now here I have to collect a couple of rings, but thankfully there's another one of those question mark blocks available to me as I make my way up to the next segment here. Now when you go over to the left, watching out for the chicken here that's popping out trying to fire at me, after a series of them, we get to one of the first kind of problem spots of the level. There's all these moving, rotating platforms. If you end up standing on them too long, they'll rotate and you could end up falling down below. Either way, jump up a couple of them and move up onto the top portion of the machine here. Now I'm going to grab the question mark block only here. I'm not going to grab anything else. Just try to avoid accidentally hitting that ring block so I don't end up with any unnecessary fat here. I gotta hit this one here and I can blast my way forward, avoiding a lot of the rings and a little segment there before heading down in here. Jump up to this platform and run my way through, and now here you gotta be very careful because you have to hold on to this and like let go of it in order to fly through, but normally during gameplay I use the rings to know where I need to go or where it's safe to go. But in this case, I gotta make sure I don't go where the rings are. I've always hated that segment right there as well. There's things that move back in. Then it's that dreaded, like, thrower thing there, where if you move at all while you're hitting it, you'll fall to your demise. You have to actually let go of the controller, like, don't hit the D-pad at all, in order to make sure that you actually survive that little segment. Head on through the wall here over to the next segment and then through another one of those walls, and here we can work my way around trying to avoid some of those rings. Thankfully there's another checkpoint as well as the question mark block before busting inside of the machine in time to take on the boss here. They thankfully put another one of the question mark blocks right after this, so if you gained a little bit of weight you can lose it before you have to do a little chase kind of sequence. This is a fun boss, though. I've always liked this one. You have to wait for the laser to kind of open up and then use the spiky things in order to jump up and actually hit the laser itself. Usually pretty easy. The hardest thing is kind of avoiding accidentally the spikes more than actually getting hit by the laser, at least in my instances of doing it. Then wait, of course, for that laser barrier to disappear and then run on through. And thankfully, always, Tails is waiting for us so we can jump on the plane and head on up to the final stage of the game. Now, Death Egg is a level I have mastered over the years, especially the Metal Sonic fight. This fight is so easy for me. Jump immediately 3 times or 4 times on his head, off of it quickly before he turns into a spike ball. Then as soon as he forms on the other side, hit him 3 or 4 more times. 4 more times will end it. If you only ended up hitting him 3 times on that second portion, I always do that spin dash into him, finish him off, and now it's time to move on to Robotnik. Now, depends on how I'm playing. Like, if I'm trying to, like, speedrun the game or get through it quickly, I'll be a little bit more reckless. Like, I'm going to be a little bit more reckless here to do a lot more jumps and time it correctly. A lot of times when I'm doing this, if I just want to make sure I beat it, I'll only hit him once. Like, anytime he ends up doing the little jump down, like when his, when he ends up landing, ends up moving downwards. I always wait in the corners for him to pop on down, and when he does a little thing downwards, jump at him. Here I end up doing it both times and then avoid the spiky arms as he ends up firing them out, and then repeat the process here, wait for the corner, wait for him to drop, and then jump at him again. You have to really time it specifically, though, because you have a very small window a lot of times in order to jump up, or you'll accidentally hit the spike arms. Once he's defeated, though, we get to sit back and enjoy the ending, the Sonic 2 XL, which is basically just the normal Sonic 2 ending, but still, awesome ending. So there you have it, Sonic 2 XL. It's definitely a ROM hack I recommend checking out to longtime classic Sonic fans. It doesn't really change up, like I said, much of the levels or anything like that. It's not like a fancier hack that I usually am more inclined to give a try to, but like I said, this one caught on a little bit in popularity. I've seen it mentioned a few places and around, and so I decided to play it. I'm glad I did. Like I said, I love Sonic 2. It's my absolute favorite Sonic game ever. And they're just personal preference. I love most of the other classic Sonic games, and I honestly enjoy most Sonic games, period. Even nowadays, there's only a couple ones that honestly I just have no interest in ever playing or adventuring through again. But anything related to Sonic 2, I'm usually willing to give a try to. I've been looking at a few other Sonic ROM hacks. So I may give a few of those a try in future ROM hack videos. If you're interested in seeing me do more specifically Sonic-related ROM hacks, if there are ones that really stand out, like you really enjoy or really think are worth my time, just let me know down in the comment section below. I'd be more than willing to at least give a look to. I can't always promise that I will play them. I'm not really into the really extremely difficult ones. I don't know if they really exist as much for Sonic as they do for Mario, as there are just so many ungodly, ridiculously hard Mario hacks I have no interest in really messing with. But either way, let me know down in the comments certain Sonic hacks, if there are any in particular. I have one in mind I'm already going to be doing. I won't say what it is. I'll be working on it in the next few weeks, hopefully, and getting that out for people to see. I just started recently kind of messing with it. It's a really cool little ROM hack for what it is. Well, it definitely wasn't the first Sonic game I ever played. Sonic 1 will always be the first one I ended up messing with, but I will never forget how many countless hours and summer days off of school were spent playing through Sonic 2, so I definitely appreciate this ROM hack existing and putting a different level of appreciation into the game, that's for sure. And there, of course, is the end. So you get to see at the very end of it, that Sonic 2 logo, before, of course, it'll go back to the Sega screen and we could start the game all over again. But with that, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up or commenting down below. If you enjoyed this ROM hack, be sure to check out one I recently did for Back to the Future Enhanced Edition, taking the LJN classic Back to the Future game and making a few adjustments here and there to make it at least a little bit more playable. You may also be interested in checking out my top 10 summer vacation games that I did recently as well. I also need to thank all the members of my Patreon. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Without your guys' pledges, I wouldn't be able to keep doing what I'm doing. If you would like to help out, click the Become a Supporter on Patreon button at the bottom of the screen, and it'll take you to the page for all the information. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.